Hello, everybody. I'm Kiley Jacques, Senior Editor at Green Building Advisor, and I'll be the moderator for tonight's webinar. First off, Fine Homebuilding would like to thank Feeney for sponsoring this presentation. Feeney specializes in deck and stair railings, producing everything from individual components for stainless steel cable railings to complete railing systems. For more about their products, visit feeneyinc.com. Some quick housekeeping items. If you haven't joined us for a webinar before on Big Marker, the platform Big Marker, there's a chat box at the right-hand side of your screen. That box is to share comments with other attendees. If you have specific questions for the panelists, please use the Q&A tab next to the chat tab. And we'll be monitoring that section and we'll answer as many questions as possible toward the last 10 minutes of the show. I'm super excited about this panel of women. They are all carpenters working full-time in various capacities in the construction industry. They're also located in different parts of the country, which adds to their perspective. It's not every day that we get an opportunity to hear from such a group, so I'm looking forward to learning what they have to say. On to introductions. Maria Klemperer-Johnson is founder of the Hammerstone School for Women in Carpentry near Ithaca, New York. Maria is also an assistant professor at SUNY Delhi, where she helms the residential construction program. Welcome, Maria.
Thank you.
Elly Hart is a site lead on multifamily development projects in Vancouver, Canada. She has a certification in carpentry and is currently working on her bachelor's degree in construction management. Thank you for joining us, Elly.
Hi.
Anna Heath is a lead carpenter and project manager for Maine Passive House. She started as an apprentice 4 years ago and has discovered a passion for encouraging women and people not traditionally seen in the trades to learn carpentry skills. Nice to see you again, Anna. And last but certainly not least, is Dejah Léger, who is a superintendent and carpenter with Carlisle Classic Homes in Seattle, Washington. She has worked in the trades for 3 years, having come from a background in music, graphic design, and woodworking. I'm glad you're here, Dejah. It's a great panel. So when I was asked to do this presentation, I got thinking about how the fine home building community that I've been among for a number of years now, and the residential building community or industry at large spends a lot of time talking about the skilled trades gap. And we also hear regularly about the challenges that women in particular face, barriers to entering the field. Things like pay gaps, being passed over for promotions, lack of role models, etc. So I got to thinking, well, if those barriers didn't exist or we somehow got rid of them, what would the labor pool look like? And presumably it would include a lot more women. So how do we get rid of those barriers and start to fill the trades gap with women? That's the overarching question that I thought would frame our conversation tonight. So to kick off the conversation, I was thinking we should consider how we engage young girls. Seemingly that's a good place to start. So where are those opportunities? What are we doing now and what might we do better and do more of? And I thought maybe Maria, who helped me brainstorm some of these questions, could be the first to address that and get things rolling.
Yeah, I think that I think we definitely need to reach girls in middle school and high school a lot more. And I have to say that even in my role as an educator, I personally don't do a lot of outreach to younger populations, for a variety of reasons. There's just only so much time in the day, but I do see it as a place that needs work. But I was actually, I know I helped you brainstorm these questions, Kiley, but as I was sitting down and thinking about them before this talk, I actually started thinking about my personal path into the trades and the fact that I started in the trades like pretty late in my career. I mean, I felt ancient, and of course now I think I was so young when I started in the trades, but I felt really old when I finally started working in the trades, and I had gone to college, and it hadn't even occurred to me that this was a possible pathway for me. And then I had, worked in the computer industry for a couple of years, which is where I had my degree. And then I went and I started graduate school. And by the time I finally started working in the trades, I was, it must have been like 27 or 28. And I felt like really far on. And in the early days, I sort of looked at myself and I regretted that I had missed this opportunity to get started younger. Of course, now, I have many years under my belt, and it's not as apparent. But I think that one thing that we might want to consider is how to make it more accessible for women to join the trades a little bit later in life, because I think there might be, at least right now, until we make this big cultural shift where young people see trades as a viable option and girls see trades as a viable option. Maybe the first step is to make the trades more welcoming to older women. Not, that doesn't mean really old. It's just like, maybe like their second career path or try. And I have to say, at Hammerstone, I get a lot of women signing up for classes who say, I am actually interested in a second career in the trades. I just want to tell this one story about, she was actually a student in one of my classes in the second year that I was teaching. Fantastic Canadian woman who had worked in mining. And she must have been in her mid to late 40s. And she told me, and so she worked in this like male dominated industry, but she had always really wanted to be a carpenter and she felt like she couldn't. And she told me this story about how when she was in her 30s, she thought, maybe now I'll go and be a carpenter. But she thought, well, I'm too old now. I can't start this career now. And then she got into her 40s and she said, I really wish I could start a career in carpentry. And I should have done it when I was 30 because I thought I was too old then, but I wasn't too old then. But I'm definitely too old now. And then she was in this class with me and she said, and now I look back at myself when I was in my early 40s and I thought I was too old then, but I definitely wasn't too old then. But I'm really too old now in her late 40s. And I was like, clearly you don't see the pattern here and you should just go for it.
Just do it, yeah.
Like, just go into the trades career. So while I do think it's an interesting question that we should address, how to get younger people into the trades, I think that maybe another thing we need to consider is how to make the trades welcoming for people, right, and especially women, coming into this, after they've gained a little perspective on life, they've, I still think it's necessary to sort of build that thick skin and to recognize that you really can. I think we still tell young girls that they only fit into certain jobs, and you kind of have to get out in the world and see that maybe that's not true. Of course, we want to change that, but maybe the first step is to just make the trades more welcoming to the second career set. And I'd be really interested to hear from the rest of the panel what their experience is. Is this like your first job right out of high school, out of school, or did you go down another path and then start in the trades?
Yeah, I had a really similar experience. Sorry, did I just interrupt?
No. Go ahead, Elly. I want to hear from you.
Yeah, I had a really similar experience to you, Maria. This is my second career, and like you, a big question that I have is how do we make it more accessible for women and just people in general who didn't start off in construction? Because so often I think a lot of people who work in construction have only ever worked in construction. That's where they started. They had family members in it. Mm-hmm. So the question is how, I guess. That's sort of like the overarching sort of thought on my mind is we have a skills gap. And I think a big part of the solution is to make it more accessible for people outside of the typical young high school leavers. But not really sure how. But yeah, I started off in journalism, and when I was in high school, I was told to specifically stay away from apprenticeships and to put my efforts towards getting into university. The trades, and I think to this day it still is the case, they're seen as a last resort.
I think it's interesting. I think all of us here have transitioned into I mean, you're all carpenters, I'm a journalist, but nonetheless, we're talking second careers. I think Dejah and Anna, that's the case for both of you too, right?
Yeah. And I'm 40. I mean, this
Right.
is the second career, and I'm starting this journey, really at a later second career stage.
Mm-hmm.
It is not the case for me.
Okay.
I actually, I went to school for things that are not related to carpentry whatsoever and got a bunch of debt, and then went into the trades because that's logical. So I definitely agree with everything we've been saying. We're pushing people in a direction that they don't necessarily have to take. They don't have to go that like prescribed high school, college route. They can have success and no debt and enter the trades and have a very fulfilling and like lucrative career. Thinking on access early on and like shifting the culture. Our classes in school could be focused better. We could do geometry for the trades. We could, like, that's the only reason I use geometry anymore is roof pitches and stuff like that, and like, I don't know, like maybe the shop class goes to a lumberyard to pick out materials. So you're part of all of this a little bit more.
Yeah. I think the role of education, it has to come into play because that's where young girls are going to be introduced to it, right? And I don't know, I've been out of school for so long that I don't know if, shop class is still even a thing or what it looks like. I didn't know what it looked like when it was available to me. So how do we key young girls into this opportunity and make it feel like something to go after? I guess that's the question. I don't know that any of us have the answer, but what do you think would inspire, girls who are in middle school and high school to really look into this seriously as a career path? I mean, what appealed to you about it that made you follow that path?
Well, for me, it definitely came down to I liked being outside and physical. I knew a desk job wasn't going to be for me, and it wasn't. I tried it. I did graphic design. I hated being behind a computer. So I think there is that, attractive aspect to it. But I think we also have to kind of, as Anna alluded to, emphasize the monetary aspect of being in the trades. We have this double perspective of the trades as being the dumping ground in a way for societal rejects, which is a horrible stereotype. But we also know that trades make a lot of money, and somehow we have to divorce those two and really focus on saying, this is a lucrative career. It's not, the throwaway. It's not the last resort. This is a skilled and lucrative career that, it's one of the few, this comes down to statistics and numbers, but it's one of the few industries that has the lowest or the closest pay wage gap between men and women. And again, that's because we are like 1% of carpenters are women. So it's a numbers game. But, if we push this idea that, women are paid very well in this industry, that's an enticing thing to me. I'm trying to raise a family, and that's definitely a huge part of why I got into it.
Yeah.
My kids are school age, and embarrassingly, I don't know enough about their curriculum, but I do see that there is this focus on STEAM these days, which seems and that's great. I think that they're incorporating a lot of hands-on stuff, but it does seem very like high-tech focused, high technology, and I don't know how much like true trades work there is. And at least in New York State, if you want to really study the trades in high school, you need to go to a separate program, a BOCES program. So it's a different school, and kids spend a lot of time on buses getting to that program. And as we all know, the smart kids are discouraged or even told that they're just not allowed to do the BOCES program. And also, I think girls are still actively discouraged from going to BOCES to study, carpentry or the other trades. So, I know it's a struggle in high schools, middle schools and high schools to, fit all the curriculum in that they want, but I would love to see more like um, carpentry, electric, plumbing, those types of trades. It doesn't all have to be high tech. And I worked in high tech, and when I went to college, it was like, that was like the legitimate sort of creative hands-on, the work I was drawn to was like making things. And so computer programming was like the legitimized version of that. And then I, like you, Dejah, I realized that I hated sitting behind a desk, and I really wanted to be physical and to be outside. So, it's not that high tech is bad, but there's these other options for people who are creative, who like building things, who like to step back and see what they made and work with their hands with real physical materials. I'd like to see more of that in schools. And I think if it's in the actual home school, then the schools can do a lot to encourage boys and girls in it. Because I think they're doing a pretty good job of that with STEAM, with all the higher tech stuff.
There's a comment in the public chat. Bonnie took a welding course that became available, and we have something similar here where there is a discovery program for women who are interested in trying out different trades. And that's I know that's for I've heard that it's actually been really great for opening doors, because like Bonnie says in the chat, you don't know you like a thing until you try it. Mm-hmm. So how do you develop that passion? And I think especially for women who want to make a go of it in this career, you really need to have a passion to stick it out, because it's challenging.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think having access to courses where you can try it out, no strings attached, no commitments, especially for those of us who grew up in households where we're actively discouraged from pursuing, working with our hands.
I also think women taught courses like what Maria's doing are
gold.
Pretty crucial.
Right. Yeah, there are not enough of them. That's true. I mean, that sort of speaks to the idea of a kind of, I don't know if it's a cultural shift exactly, but ways to make these options and resources available, but not intimidating. It's, I think there's a way in which young girls feel a little apprehensive about joining, or even looking into or pursuing careers that are traditionally held by men. So we've got work to do there. And this is part of it, right? Introducing young girls to women like you who are doing, following this path and making a success of it. Do you have any other thoughts on how to make careers in the trades less intimidating and seemingly more accessible to younger girls and women?
I just wanted to pick up on what you were saying there, Kiley, about women being intimidated by picking up a traditionally male skill under the male gaze, because this is something, of course, teaching carpentry for women classes as a female instructor is something that I think about a lot. How important is it to teach women-only classes? And I have that question on a survey that I give to students after every class, and I usually get positive answers like this. I only would have done this because it was a class only for women, but quite a few women say no, it wasn't actually that important to me. I've had the answer, it was more important to me that it was taught by a woman than that it was women only. But I have noticed, and the very few times that I've taught mixed sex classes, I've recognized different behavior when women are learning a new skill in the company of men, especially a traditionally male skill, that they tend to step back. And I've noticed this in myself, that I will be much more hesitant to try something new if I feel like I'm being observed, especially if I feel like I'm being observed by the so-called experts, the people that we think are experts, even though they might not be. There are studies that show that young girls who go to girls-only schools do better just in general once they once they enter, mainstream, the mainstream world. And I had an interesting conversation with a colleague at Dejah, a female professor in the construction management program, who said, well, it's a little unfair to teach women in this women-only environment, because once they get out, they're not going to be working on a women-only crew. And that's definitely true probably for most people. Maybe it won't be forever, but at least for now, chances are you will be the only woman on a crew. And so does it put you at a disadvantage to have studied, to have learned in this environment where you're sort of protected from that male gaze while you're learning the skill? I personally think that it's really worthwhile to have that opportunity to build those skills without even having to think about that other stuff. And then you're comfortable. And then you're confident, and you're like, well, I don't care if someone thinks I'm doing it wrong or is going to comment on the way I'm doing something. I know in my heart that I know how to do this. But when you don't know how to do it and having to do it under that that's really tricky. So it's a good question. Like, how important is it that we have women-only education? Ideally it wouldn't be for forever. Like, ideally we would change the system so that there's equality. And if there were as many women studying carpentry at Dejah as there are men, I think that would change the equation. But right now, we have 2 to 3 women every year in a class of like 25 to 50. And it's really the toughest ones who stick it out. And it shouldn't be that way, because among the guys, definitely not the toughest ones who stick it out, right? The really tough guys, and the guys that are like barely hanging on, they all, for the most part, they stick it out. But among the girls, it's really only the toughest.
I think the women-only classes go a really long way to creating a safe space.
Yes.
For a lot of women, I think, who start off in this industry, they feel like they have no one that they can lean on except for their male co-workers, who don't often, despite good intentions, have the capacity to be that kind of support. So I think definitely the women-only classes in the beginning, and for this, at this point in the history of the industry, because there are so few women, it makes a difference.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I was missing day-to-day support-wise until we hired a second female carpenter on my crew. Like, there was just this whole, I don't know, nurture. Was that, did he really say that? Is that okay? Is that not okay? Until she was there with me.
Interesting. I have yet to work with another woman carpenter. I've never worked beside another woman.
Yeah. I had like a 6-month stretch in the 10 years that I was working in the field for other people where there was another woman. And at first I was like, yeah, like you, Anna. I was like, I don't notice anything because I didn't know any different. And then when I had my own crew and I hired other women, I was just like, oh, wow, this can be different. And I worked on, I live in Ithaca, New York. Like, everybody's like really understanding, and there wasn't like there was harassment or anything negative on any crews, but it was just different. And working with other women,
I think sometimes it's the institution or the educational institution or the company for whom you're working, and what kind of staff they have and how supportive they are, how open-minded they are. It's not necessarily a gendered issue. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. If you've got the right support and you are learning from somebody who is very skilled, and you feel like they are giving you what they would give to anybody in terms of an education, then you're halfway there, right? I do remember I took a class with Maria just to get my toes wet. I'm not a carpenter, but, just to learn some things. And I will say the very initial conversation we had created this space in which everybody was able to just relax and feel, it was like a judgment-free zone. And we were able to absorb the information and admit that, maybe we were a little nervous about using power tools because we're not carpenters. It's unfamiliar to us. And everybody starts somewhere. So I think when you go back to thinking about young girls, it's understandable that they might be intimidated by the tools, the math, all of what goes into, right here we're talking about carpentry skills, or trade skills in general. It's unfamiliar terrain. Unfortunately, I think that's still the case for young girls. That's why I think Maria's program is so wonderful. Any opportunity to give young people, young girls and women transitioning into a career, an opportunity to feel safe and be unguarded about their questions and make space for themselves and just explore is vital. And if any of us have the opportunity to do that, I think it's really important. And in fact, one of the questions that I came up with that I'd really like to hear your thoughts on, because it's something I've struggled with. I also made a career change. I was a gardener for 22 years, so I worked physically. I studied landscape construction. I was among a lot of guys, young guys. I've been down this road in a different capacity, but one of the things I think we can all speak to is the idea of how do you make, and I think this is something, Elly, I'd love to hear from you on this. How do you make physical and intellectual room for yourself when you're working among men, especially in a physical realm? That's a really important question to answer.
Yeah.
Not to put the pressure on, but I just feel like it's...
this is something that I think about regularly, but not in a conscious way. Mm-hmm. So for me, what I've learned along the way was it's like, I think a lot of women who do work in construction, being the overwhelming minority, you feel like you have to accommodate the men around you.
Right.
You take on the emotional labor of catering to the needs of your coworkers, and you don't realize that you're doing it. But then you come home each day and you feel so overwhelmed, not just because the work is difficult, but for another reason. You don't really know why, but you feel it on the inside. You're like I don't remember ever feeling so overwhelmed like this when I worked in a different industry. So for me, it was really important to establish really firm boundaries. What can I accept and what kind of behavior would I not tolerate? And this became even more important for me when I moved into a supervisory position, because there was a lot of resentment among my coworkers who felt like they should be in my shoes. That was really hard for me to deal with, and I'm still kind of navigating those waters. But we need to have those boundaries, be aware of our strengths, and also be open about our weaknesses, and also know when it's appropriate to ask for help. And I think education does make a big difference as well.
Dejah, what are your thoughts on that?
I was thinking a lot about this since, over the day and stuff. And one of the ways that I made space for myself in the trades is twofold. And this kind of ties into the idea of starting it as a second career, is that I went in just being very authentic to who I am. And it took a long time, and I'm still not I'm 80% sure who I am, right? But I could take that 80% and be put my foot in and just be this, I'm not going to try to mold myself into what I think is expected of me as a woman on this job site. I'm going to wear makeup. I'm going to do my hair. I'm going to not do my hair. I'm not going to wear, I wanted to be one of the guys, but I didn't want to be a guy. Mm-hmm. And that was an important distinction for me, to hold my own space in a job site. And if I could see immediately that people were kind of uncomfortable, should they mention, can they joke? Can they mention something? I'll be the first to crack a joke, mm-hmm. kind of break the ice or something, and then people felt a little bit more comfortable approaching me about, different things or issues, or, trying to navigate their own emotions on how to talk around a woman and where those boundaries are. But it started with me setting those boundaries, and started with me holding that space for myself. So,
do you ever find yourself being inauthentic to who you really are in terms of trying to make everybody comfortable so that you can also feel comfortable?
Yes.
You know, like using language that you would never otherwise use. It's like code switching almost.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't usually say that, but here I am slinging it out just so that I can make a space where I feel comfortable so that you feel comfortable. It's just a strange dynamic.
Totally.
It is. And I
Yeah.
wonder if it's less being inauthentic and more being multifaceted, you know, just,
Yeah, that's a good,
you know,
that's a good
being
way to
able
look at it.
to meld and shift and change and show different sides of ourselves.
Mhm.
Maybe we're just better skilled at it
Yep. Yeah. It is
in
a
healthy
skill.
ways and
It is a
unhealthy
skill.
ways, you know.
I also find that what I feel comfortable with has changed as I've gotten older, and some of the ways that I acted when I was younger, I don't act in those ways anymore. Like the jokes that I would tell, or the ways that I would behave, which I didn't think of as just fitting in, like just trying to be one of the guys. I mean, I do think that I felt like that was just who I was authentically, but as I've gotten older and as I've done this, as I've basically worked with more women, because every job that I've had has been in a very male dominated trade, I've sort of recognized these parts of myself and of femininity that I was just really pretty unaware of. And I've opened up to that and sort of like walked away from some other behaviors or ways of being that, I mean, I don't like, really, it's not like I regret it or think I was a horrible person, but I've just sort of moved away from that. So, I would have just joined in the like stupid banter at one point, and now I don't really feel the need or want to join in that.
Mhm.
I feel a lot of pressure to not react emotionally to things. Like, I feel like I won't be taken seriously if I have an emotional reaction to something. And so the easy antithesis to that is to react gruffly in a very like masculine, kind of perpetuating this like toxic culture that already exists in the trade, where you shout and you get something done that way, and you don't really face it as like a, hey, I'm really frustrated with what you just did, it doesn't work, this isn't great, you need to do better, and like, in order to sort of navigate my natural reaction to things and my fear of being perceived as too emotional, I preface a lot of my feedback with, I'm going to be really direct with you right now. And that gives me a space to have whatever emotional reaction I'm having and just call it directness. And I don't know, it's worked for me.
That's a good trick. I like
that. Yeah, that is a good trick. Any other tips along those lines? I think that's really excellent. Yeah.
You don't find at all that, I don't know, I don't believe that as a woman, like it should be my responsibility to change the way that I behave in order to make the men around me feel comfortable. But I think as girls, we're socialized to believe that that's how we're supposed to be. That it's inherently part of being female, and we're expected to be sensitive and caring and demure. And if we don't want to be like that, we're penalized for it. Yeah. We're labeled as bitches. Boys, on the other hand, have traditionally been socialized to, like not express any feelings, not show any kind of vulnerability. And when they do, they're praised for it, they get extra credit for it. But if they don't, it's okay and they get a pass. I don't feel that as a woman, I get a pass.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's all very true. Marie and I, when we were kind of talking about the direction this conversation might take, she's in education, and I'm wondering if, or we both kind of wondered whether or not credentialing should play a larger role, and higher education and those opportunities in terms of, recruiting young women into the trades. Do you all have thoughts on that? I mean, I know Elly you're doing that right now, right? You've got your certification and you're pursuing a bachelor's degree. So
it's my coping mechanism. It's kind of like my coping mechanism. Like, I honestly feel that if I didn't take the path that I took, doing an apprenticeship and completing the apprenticeship and taking the education part of it really seriously, I would never have gotten my foot in the door. Mm-hmm. Like, I think, how many industries can you think of today where you still go around knocking on doors asking for a chance?
Right.
we still get that all the time. People coming around knocking, handing out resumes, and it's like construction must be one of the few industries left where that's still a thing. But I think why education matters so much to me is because without it, I feel like I would definitely have a disadvantage. I don't think that I would be where I am today if it wasn't for, doing the training alongside the hands-on experience. So, I mean, there are so many different ways that you can, do the work and educate yourself as well. You don't have to go to a university or a college or do something formal. You can do something in a less structured setting as well. But I think to change the culture of construction, education is going to be a big part of that. And it's just that there is this like mindset, which I do in many ways agree with, that hands-on experience is more important. But I do think there has to be a balance between the two. I find my job technically very difficult. I couldn't imagine doing it. I can't, I still feel like I'm winging it every day. But if it wasn't for the schooling helping me through that, I think I'd feel like I was really lost.
It strikes me as interesting, having done something similar to what you did, which is to get a certification to make a leap into a new direction. It seems like it's like a bona fide, it's a recognizable, okay, you've committed to this, you are receiving the right information, you're following through on the commitment that you've made to learn about this trade, whatever it is. Versus, say, in the field of construction, a lot of young men are just kind of like born to it, right? They just kind of come at it from, my dad taught me, I have all these skills. I come to the table with all of these skills that I've just accumulated almost by osmosis. Versus for women, it seems like oftentimes they don't come from that background, and the educational route gives them some standing, some ground to stand on. It shows commitment. It shows you know the information. I don't know. Do you think that it's a more viable route for women to follow? I'm not trying to make that argument. I'm just curious. It's like, does it give you a leg up in an industry in which you have no other leg up?
I definitely think so. I feel that as a woman, they don't assume that I'm competent in my job until I prove I do. Whereas for my male co-workers, I feel like it's the opposite. You're assumed that you can do the job until you prove that you can't. So I think for women especially, it's sort of like for me, it's a coping mechanism, I say that, but really it's sort of like you said, it's a leg up. It's a way for me to, earn some respect and feel like I can hold my own, because I don't have the same sort of experience coming up in the industry as a lot of the guys that I work with.
I feel like it can be a really empowering tool for women, for sure, and that provides access. I also am like a little bit hesitant about this, because I would love to encourage people with no experience to come and learn the way I did, and learn the way a bunch of these men are learning on the job, and I don't know the right answer here. Like, are we perpetuating something that we shouldn't be perpetuating, or are we helping reshape an attitude that women can carry with them, where they have to have qualifications in order to fit into this place?
Right.
But I think in order for that to happen, we need a more robust apprenticeship.
Apprenticeships, exactly.
Because I know, having tried to, as a very small construction company, having tried to hire people with very little experience, it was really tough as a business owner. As much as I, wanted to support them and to, teach them, it's just really hard, and we don't have the support of like a apprenticeship program that's sort of larger than the individual business. I was thinking about the fact that, on the one, if you think about credentialing as sort of supporting the individual, I really believe in that most guys who get into the trades, they get hired by their uncle every summer, and then they just learn this stuff growing up, and then it's really easy for them to just walk onto a construction site and get a job. Whereas for women, if they have a credential, that allows them to say, look, I've gone to a trade school, I know what I'm doing. They can get a reference from an instructor, and it does give them the leg up. But the other way to think about credentialing is to support the cause of getting more women into the trades. Mm-hmm. And an institution, a trade school, especially a trade school that's tied to, like SUNY Delhi is a state school, right? So we're tied to all the resources of the state, and also it's in the state's interest. There's Title IX and all these other programs which are designed to support women in non-traditional roles, sports and careers. And so we can leverage all of that support to get more women into these credentialing programs. I don't see that happening yet to the capacity that I would like to see it. As I mentioned before, we only have like 2 or 3 women in our program. It's still better than the national average of women working in the trades, but still there's a long way to go. But when I got my first job in the trades, during my interview, my future employer said something that if I was hired by, like a legitimate, like a corporation, I could have gone to HR and said, like, this is completely inappropriate for this. I took the job and I ended up working for the guy, and it was all fine. But when he hired me, he said, well, I've hired women before. I'd love to hire you, but I need to ask my wife first if I can hire a woman, right? Completely inappropriate. Mm-hmm. But because it was just like this small contracting business, there's no HR department that I can go to, right? And once you're working in these companies, there's no one that you can go to and say, I'm being discriminated against, I'm being sexually harassed, whatever. But having these like institutions like trade schools, or even like, I don't think we should move in the direction of like only larger companies building, but anytime there's like institutional support, it can help level the playing field for women. And I think we need to leverage that as much as possible. And then, if we can fill the trade schools with half women, that just like bumps the number of women going and getting these jobs, even if there's attrition. And I think that will get more women actually working in the trades. As much as and I took the same path as you. I just went and started working, not exactly the same path, but when I started in the trades, I was just like, I'm just going to learn on the job. So that's the way I did it. But I do think that it is valuable to
maybe.
I think it's everybody should do it. I wish this was like everybody was required a credential to get into this industry where you have to lift heavy things and do dangerous work every day. But
right.
Dejah, did you do an apprenticeship too?
No, my job title was an apprentice carpenter, but it was not necessarily that just meant that I got kind of thrown into a project and said, here, swim, Mm-hmm. So I loved that. And I'm also a very self-motivated learner. And I was been kind of reading through the Q&As and chats. And one of the things that appealed to me about the trades very specifically is that I didn't have to go back to school because I was starting a second career, because I have children at home, because I don't have time. And also because I'm drawn to self-reliance. That's one of the reasons I got into the trades, thinking, well, if I totally fail at it, maybe at least I'll have gotten paid to learn how to do DIY stuff around my house. Right? And so I don't have to rely on people to come do these things. So like a lot of these things, I took my own education very seriously and read, JLC and Fine Homebuilding. And, I tried to read everything I could and learn everything I could, ask lots of questions. But that's a unique situation. But, as much as I want education to be a big part of the trades, I also am thankful in a lot of ways as well that it's something I could walk into. And I feel as a woman, I feel like I can do a lot of things. And I feel like I can do a lot of things that men can't. And I feel like I can do a lot of things that men can't. And I feel like I can do a lot of things that men can't. And I feel like I can do a lot of things that men can't. And I feel like I can do a lot of things that men can't. And I feel like I can do a lot of things that men can't. And I feel like I can do a lot of things that men can't. And I feel like I can do a lot of things that men can't. And I feel like I can do a lot of things that men can't. And I feel like I can do a lot of things that men can't. And I feel like I can do a lot of things that men can't. And I feel like I can do a lot of things that men can't. And I feel like I can do a lot of things that men can't. And I feel like I can do a lot of things that men can't. And I feel like I can do a lot of things that men can't. And I feel like I can do a lot of things that men can't. And I feel like I can do a lot of things that men can't. And I feel like I can do a lot of things that men can't. And I feel like I can do a lot of things that men can't. And I as a woman, I do have a huge advantage, not a disadvantage. When I started looking for another company to work for, I knew it was a huge advantage to be looking for a job as a female carpenter, especially with some experience under my belt. Because, you know, on one hand, I knew that it's an optics thing, and I had to be careful that I wasn't just going to be put up as like the token carpenter. But on the other hand, I knew that a lot of people are wanting to hire women, and the fact that I'm walking in gives me a huge advantage over my male colleagues who are kind of a dime a dozen.
Yeah.
They're not. You know what I mean?
Right.
I stand out. We stand out, right? So whether we're taken seriously or not, whether we have the, you know, the expectation of the skill set being the same or not, that's a different issue. But being able to stand out in a crowd and kind of have that advantage optically right away, to me continues to be a big advantage. And not having to go to school for me is a big advantage.
Well, the union.
Anna,
Sorry.
Anna's, your company, Maine Passive House, has been pretty proactive with hiring women. And can you speak to that a little bit in terms of what Dejah just said?
Yeah, I mean, we have 5 women and 7 men in the field. So we're almost 50-50. We run workshops pretty similar to what Hammerstrong's doing with our barn. We have a workshop space in Maine, and we have 5 people on every workshop, all women, who lead these workshops, and we've invited anybody. We're focusing our efforts on marginalized communities and people who may or may not feel comfortable entering the trades because of how they look or how they identify. And through that, and weirdly enough, Instagram, we've been able to attract a lot of people who are interested in how we building passive, but also who is on our crews. So Instagram. It's weird beast.
It's a tool, that's for sure. Let's see, what other questions had we prepared?
Can I jump in really quickly?
Absolutely.
I was kind of a running theme. Well, actually, there's 2 things. There's been kind of a running theme on the chats that I'm picking up, which maybe we'll get to in a Q&A, a lot about the physical aspects of the work and our bodies being suited or not suited, or capable, not capable, breaking, not breaking eventually. So that definitely is something I'd love to address. And then the other question that I've started asking my male colleagues in terms of the idea of the cultural shift that should and can happen around carpentry and construction is my male colleagues who have daughters, nieces, and stuff. I'll ask them, great, are you going to encourage your daughter to go into the trades or your niece to go in the trades? And instinctively their answer is no. And I'll ask them why. And the answer that they give me is kind of complex and twofold. One is they are afraid of the physical aspects of this work and the toll that they know it takes on their body. They're like, I'm 30 and I'm living in a 75-year-old body and my back's broken, right? I don't want my kid to do this, daughter or son. And then other people are concerned about the mental aspect, saying, is my child going to be the woman who gets harassed on the job site, experience sexual discrimination? So they know those issues are there. And that's a big shift for me and a way for me to say, great, it's also up to men to make those efforts to make space for women in the trades as well. If they know those issues are there instinctively, then we can start to discuss them and figure out how to make those spaces.
Yeah. And there are those men out there. There absolutely are.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's always very refreshing to meet them and feel encouraged by them, and they give you that space and allow you to demonstrate your skill set. I highly encourage men to be that way.
Yeah.
Because it makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, they're going to have to put
building
in
confidence and giving you a place to develop your skills. Right. Those are great thoughts. Let's see what I should probably. Did somebody want to jump in? I should take a look and see what we have in the Q&A.
Oh yeah, I was going to jump in terms of the physical work. Mm-hmm. It is grueling. I mean, I'm only 5 feet tall. I don't know how tall you guys are, but obviously I'm on the smaller side. I love lifting stuff. That's just kind of my nerd aspect. But I also feel like we tend to work smarter, not harder in a lot of ways, and use tools. I definitely use leverage to my advantage, tools to my advantage. Like, there's not necessarily a reason that I can find on a job site to put my body in physical danger if I don't have to. Like, there are workarounds, and I think a lot of guys get hurt because they want to just do it, fast at the last second. And of course they can throw this thing over their head and nail it. And, whereas I kind of stop and think about it, and like, I could probably use a tool to lift that or do that better without breaking my back. So it is grueling. It is physical. There's no denying that, but I don't see a reason why another 40-year-old 5-foot woman couldn't get into this trade right now and be just fine, to be honest. That's my opinion.
I talk about this a little bit in the Hammerstone classes. I like to think about all the guys that I've worked with when I encounter this question. And I've worked with this really wide variety of guys. Like, my first boss in carpentry was like 6'4", had a positive ape index, right? His wingspan was greater than his height. He was, tall and lean, and like could basically like take a sheet of plywood and throw it on a roof, right? So you have this physical advantage. But then the next guy I worked with was taller than me, and super skinny, but wiry and strong. He just had a different physicality, right? So he wasn't as tall, and so that's a disadvantage. But he was perfectly capable with the body that he had and the strength that he had. And he had to find workarounds for his height disadvantage, but didn't even think about it. And then I worked with guys who were like so out of shape that they could barely climb a ladder without stopping, gasping for breath. So you do encounter among men this like wide variety of physicality, and they all make do. And honestly, like you're right, Dejah. It is grueling and it's really hard work. And I think back to when I was like actively physically working in the field, and I was really tired every day, and I'm really good kind of tired. And I think that everybody should experience working hard like that every day. But there are also times when, for months on end, I would be, I would never encounter having to lift anything super heavy. If you're doing like an interior renovation, everything's pretty light. So, and like you said, there are ways to work smarter. So, even the most brute force guy will eventually reach his limit and not be able to brute force anything. And then he's going to be stuck because he's not used to finding the smart solution, right? He's not used to thinking about levers and pulleys and ramps and whatnot. Whereas we're always thinking about the smart way to do it to protect our bodies. But the other thing that I think about, and I bumped into this when I was doing this job for a woman client, and I was working with just one employee, Christina. So it was two women on the job, and we, it was replacing some windows, but she was in the house while we were working, and she was really happy with our work. But at the end of the job, she said to me, "Do you only hire women? And if so, how can you run a construction company? Because women don't have the same upper body strength as men." And first of all, I was just like blown away because we had just finished a job, and still she still doubted our capacity. But what really struck me was that she just made this assumption that women have less upper body strength. And by thinking that about herself, I believe that she never worked to sort of maximize her own upper body strength. And it's true that on average, yes, we will have less upper body strength than most men. A woman with a lot of upper body strength will, of course, meet a man where she has more upper body strength than him. But on average, women are smaller and have less strength. But we also, if we tell ourselves that all the time, then we never develop to our full potential. And I actually see that a lot, where we're like, oh, well, I don't have upper body strength, and then we don't work on developing it. Whereas we could do push-ups and pull-ups and, work to, or, just approach that sheet of plywood thinking, oh, maybe I can lift it, instead of like, oh, I'll never be able to lift that. And we always do it safely, and there are things that are beyond our capacity, and then we use the other tools like cooperation, asking for help. But I also think that society has told us we don't have upper body strength, and therefore we believe that about ourselves.
We also feel more comfortable asking for help, which I think is a skill that sometimes men don't have, right? Asking for help and being collaborative. And I think that's a great skill that makes work smart. One thing I did want to bring up, because we're kind of getting to the end here and I want to get some questions, but you have all been featured, to the best of my knowledge, I think you've all been featured in Fine Homebuilding's Keep Craft Alive print department. And that's an initiative that was created to inspire and empower people to who are seeking careers in the trades, and it funds scholarships to help those who want to continue their education and training. So can you share some thoughts on whether or not you feel like the Keep Craft Alive initiative is something that should be replicated? Is it a scalable not solution, but answer to this question of how do we get more women into the trades? Is that something that you folks can speak to? A curveball.
I would say anytime I get a woodworking magazine, I get Fine Woodworking, I get Fine Homebuilding, and I get a couple others, I flip through and I look for any women on the pages. I look for them in ads. If they're in ads, I check to see if it looks like they're actually doing work or not just posing. And it's made me really happy to, like, I noticed that there were more women being featured on the pages of Fine Homebuilding. And I mean, I'm already in the trade, so I don't know if it's, too late for me, but I'm hoping that more women will notice that. So
representation matters, for sure.
Yes.
Having those role models, having them visible, it definitely makes a difference. I know I do the same thing. I look for women who work in the field who can relate to what I'm going through. So yes, absolutely. I think, seeing that and seeing that you're not an anomaly, you're not some kind of novelty out in the field, it has an impact on your sense of purpose, your why you're there.
I know I still have imposter syndrome. And so when I actually wrote an article for Fine Homebuilding, I mean, that was like a dream of mine to actually write something in Fine Homebuilding. And for the longest time, I would be like, oh, could I write about that? No, that's not like legitimate enough or cool enough or fine enough to be. And I mean, I know that women, I know that everybody feels that to some degree, but I think women feel that more than men. So I encourage, more women to reach out to Kiley and see if they can write an article.
I encourage that too.
I just saw a comment in the chat from Emily that said maybe Vogue should be posting female carpenters, and I agree. Let's glamorize this. Let's normalize it. Let's make it an everyday issue for every person.
Right.
I like that.
I want to see. Okay, well, I'll share a couple of things. I think we're supposed to wrap up at 8, and it's about 8, but I feel like I would like to get to a couple of questions from the audience. Let's see. I'll just start at the top here. I'm about to turn 39. One of my concerns about entering late is physical strength. I guess we've touched on that. Long-term health impacts. Could you speak to that a bit? And I guess you have. Go ahead, Maria.
I just wanted to add that as I've gotten older, I did notice that when I was actively working in the trades, I found it hard to work out and maintain. Like I would come home exhausted. I'd be like, oh, I've been working so hard. I got a good workout, but I wasn't fit. And there was this it was kind of dangerous because I would keep doing these things that I knew I could do, but I wasn't really maintaining my fitness. And it's hard because it doesn't leave you a lot of time
Right.
to do
Mhm.
that. But I do encourage people to like find some type of regimen that works for them to
Mhm.
not just rely on the carpentry
For
to
the
make
long
that
term.
fitness, because you kind of end up like lopsided.
Yeah.
All you do is lift plywood and swing a hammer. So finding something that like balances your strength is
Yes.
pretty important.
Conditioning, for sure.
That's a
It
good
also
point.
forces you to have like a mental relief in a physical way as well. Like if you can use that exercise time as your zen out time,
Yeah.
you're doing physical stuff all day. So you're conditioned to be moving like that, but you're thinking the whole time. So it's a good way to
Right.
kind of
Decompress.
counteract it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting to choose to change careers and go into something physical. I did the opposite, whereby my body was busted, and so I needed to get away from working physically every day, because I looked at everybody around me and I thought, I cannot do this until retirement. This is not sustainable. So it's interesting to imagine, yeah, you're going to have to take some proactive measures to ensure the longevity of your joints. That's what it comes down to, your joints. Anything repetitive is very difficult to endure. However, I will say, I think genetics plays a large role in that. Some people can do it to the day they die, and they are trim, fit, and happy. And then there are others who just have a lot of back pain and issues, and you just kind of, you got to, everybody has to navigate that for themselves, I think.
I want to take this opportunity with what you're saying about transitioning out of the physical aspect of whatever trade you're in, to circle back to something that I was thinking about at the very beginning of this, which is so many people coming to carpentry as a second career. And I actually see that as a huge advantage, because, you know, if you come from journalism, you know, you have like writing skills, you have communication skills, right? And those are so valuable for transitioning into construction management. There's so much more to carpentry than just, you know, swinging a hammer. You know, there's design, and there's planning, and there's negotiating, and there's like working with clients. And you know, the people who just get in knowing the hands-on physical skills, sometimes it can be hard to learn those other skills, and they're so valuable. And so people who are coming from a second career can, you know, have that under their belt to help them transition into, like Elly is doing, you know, getting more into construction management. I'd say like communication, just being able to communicate clearly, is something that everybody needs to know how to do in whatever career they're in, especially in carpentry.
I'd love to see more of an emphasis too on like leadership and management training. I think for so many of us, like we kind of get thrown into these positions without any kind of, you know, experience in it. I know that was certainly the case for me, and you know, it's kind of like you're on your own. But I think when you're managing people, it's like it's so important, and I don't underestimate, you know, how critical it is to have those skills, to be able to communicate with the people that you work with and navigate all the challenges that come along with that. I don't see enough of that. I'd love to see more of a push for people who, you know, move into supervisory or management type roles, who get promoted. Like, we need that support too, to become managers of people and take on those extra responsibilities.
You know, Elly, as you're talking, I'm remembering how I met you, and I feel like to young people, you do something, and I'm sure you all do, but I just experienced it firsthand with Elly, that is very valuable and very smart, which is go to conferences, put yourself in front of people who are in your industry, learn from them, make an impression on them. You know, I just remember at the IBS show, you know, Elly came up to me and she said, "Hello, I'm Elly, and, you know, this is what I'm about, and this is what I do, and it's nice to meet you." And she's now a friend of the magazine. And I just feel like inserting yourself, you know, talk about making physical and intellectual space for yourself, just, you know, go to the places where the people who are the most knowledgeable about the thing that you're pursuing are getting together, and be part of it, and be confident in being there, and offer what you have to offer. That really, you made an impression on me in that way. I feel like that is a skill, and that is something for young people to aspire to, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. It's definitely, I went with these sort of ideas of what I was going for, and it ended up totally not being that at all. So it was quite the learning experience. And I've always sort of like, one of my core values is personal growth and connection. And I felt like that was a really good place to really question, some of the beliefs that I had about the industry. And it was a real eye opener. I definitely agree. Like going and exploring, the world outside of what you are aware of, day to day, it makes a really big difference in your perspective on how you fit into the industry.
That's great.
Absolutely.
Any parting thoughts from everybody? I know we didn't get to a ton of questions. I feel bad about that. Let's see. Maybe we can end with, this is a sort of good summation. What inspired each of you? Can take a minute here to talk about what inspired you to get into the trades. Let's see. Do you think that that's what will also appeal to the next generation of women? I think I've interpreted that question. So like, what inspired you, and do you think that same inspiration will hold true for younger generations? Go around the table here. Anna, what are your thoughts on that?
This is a classic example of me feeling underqualified and feeling like I needed to qualify myself. I studied chemistry and environmental engineering, but I wanted to be an architect. So don't ask me why I did it. And when I left school, I was like, oh, I need to get back into buildings, but I'm not qualified to be an architect. I can't design things. I can't do CAD. So what else is there I'm going to build? So I built things, and I like it more than anything else that I've done thus far, which isn't a long-standing career. But I don't know. It was that, and also being stuck in academia for so long and needing to use my body. Mm-hmm. So I definitely think people will resonate with that side of the equation for sure.
Yeah. Maria?
Like I mentioned before, I studied computer science, and when I look back, I see that as like wanting to be creative and build and make things. But like I said before, I hated work because I was sitting in front of a computer. And so then my second career path was going to graduate school in geology, and that was the get outside and use your body and your mind side of things. But I realized I wasn't actually that interested in geology. I just wanted to take field trips to Chile and Argentina. That will not sustain a PhD program. And so then I decided to take this leap, which I had been thinking about, but I was like, well, now I've tried these other things. They haven't worked out. I can do this thing that I've wanted to do, but I haven't felt like it was legitimate or I could do it. And so that's when I became a carpenter, and I got to make things. I got to use my body and my mind and be outside. And I hope those things are still appealing to young people, although, I watch my kids and their friends on their devices, and they don't seem as interested in using their bodies and being outside. But, occasionally I drag them out, and they seem happy being physically active outside. So maybe there's hope.
What about you, Elly? What do you have to say on
that? So I started woodworking as a hobby, and that's sort of how I ended up, getting into carpentry. I was initially looking at joinery, and I thought, well, carpentry might be better for gainful employment. So I thought they were kind of interchangeable. Today I realize they're totally different. Just because I did a carpentry program doesn't mean I know anything about joinery, and I don't. So I know, one of the biggest questions that I had when I was changing careers was, what is it really going to be like for me? And that's so I started writing a journal on it, and I wanted to meet people who were kind of in the same boat, but there weren't a lot of people that, were in the same boat. But I've since heard from people who have asked, what's how do you do it? How do you, change careers, deal with, quitting a job, starting something you know nothing about, and then being successful in it. And like, I'm still figuring it out, but if that's you, if you feel like, you want to change careers and you just don't know where to start, like my one piece of advice is you need to have someone there to, even just for moral support. Like it's very hard to do on your own. I was lucky I had a partner who could help me. But you second guess yourself. There's so much doubt in your mind about making such a huge life change. So it's definitely a big thing. And I don't encourage anyone to try and do it on their own. Come find me, come talk to me.
I love that. That's
Or
so
any
sweet.
one of the panelists here tonight.
Right. That's great. Dejah, what do you have to say?
I mean, I think what drew me to the trades is that I've always been interested in making beautiful spaces. And that's a weird thing to say, but what I mean by it is, like, even as a kid, I was always redecorating my room. I was always moving furniture around houses. I was always like painting walls. I want to make beautiful spaces that feel very comfortable and cozy for people. And so when I started thinking about a career change, which came at a time, and I kind of noticed, and as someone mentioned in the chat, it came at a time where my children were old enough that I could have them in school full time. And that was a big part, and it will be a big part for a lot of people. That is a reality, that we don't have a lot of childcare support in our culture, in our nation. That's a different topic. But, it came at a point where I was ready for a new career. And I looked at all different options. I was thinking I could be a house cleaner. I could be a house decorator. I could be in interior design. And I started going through it. And I just happened to have the opportunity to do building, to do carpentry. And I took it. And I just told myself, I'll do it for a year. If I hate it, at least I'll have the skills to, do a little DIY stuff. And I just kept at it. Turns out I was really good at it. So I think there's a lot of, for me, it was a motivation to have that beauty in my life and create beauty like that for other people. But
I love it. I feel like all of you came from kind of different perspectives and landed in a somewhat similar place. I mean, you're at least, you have similar skill sets, and I think that's very inspiring. I hope that your stories inspire whomever is watching, and I'm still struck by how do we access younger girls and make them feel comfortable about approaching this kind of not career. They don't have to think about it in terms of a career, but that's where I think a lot of effort needs to be focused. And I'm not sure what the solution is there, but at least we're talking about it, and at least we have these discussions going on a more regular basis. So, and you are all resources for anybody looking to get some questions answered. So I think we're going to have to leave it at that. But thank you all very much for coming on tonight and sharing your thoughts. And thank you, Feeney, for sponsoring our webinar. And with that, I think it's a good night. It's a wrap.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.